Dorothy Gibson. Dorothy Gibson was a pretty big deal in her time. The star of the silent screen alongside such luminaries as Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, the first-class passenger was a household name by the time she stepped on the Titanic. She had become popular as a comedian in Miss Masquerader and Love Finds a Way. But out of the 1,502 people to perish on the vessel, Gibson survived to tell the tale. Well, not just to tell it, to star in it as well. Saved from the Titanic began filming just 5 days after the Titanic sank. It was a hugely successful silent movie and the first of many hit Titanic films, although unfortunately all reels of the movie were destroyed in a fire in 1914. Gibson even wore the same clothes as she was wearing on the ship on the day of the tragedy in the movie: a dress, sweater, gloves, and black pumps. Eventually, however, another shadow of the 20th century would be cast over Gibson. After a relatively short film career, she moved to Europe. Although she was at first a Nazi sympathizer, by 1944 she had denounced her involvement with the Third Reich. Her subsequent arrest by the Nazis and brief imprisonment at San Vittore would lead to her death just 2 years later. Captain Edward John Smith. At the point of setting sail, Captain Edward John Smith was a 37-year-old veteran making what he planned to be his final crossing of the Atlantic. He'd served with the White Star Line for 28 years, but the truth is, Smith is probably not the best man to have at the helm. Smith had spent the majority of his sailing life-manning sail ships and the odd steamer here and there, and his lack of experience showed when he commanded the crew to stay at 22 knots full speed when entering an area notorious for icebergs. However, let's not forget that Captain Smith did go down with his ship, but his final hours on board remained shrouded in mystery. Many eyewitness accounts record the millionaire captain, as he was known to some, going to pieces, losing confidence, and being rather bewildered by the whole ordeal. Mystery ships. As the Titanic sank, the usual distress calls were sent out, but unfortunately nobody answered it until it was too late. What few people know is that somebody could have answered, namely the captain of the SS Californian. Only 8 to 15 miles away when the Titanic struck the iceberg, the Californian did not react to mysterious lights in the night sky. The crew woke up the captain, but he went back to bed, stating that the wireless radio operator had already turned in for the night, the reason the Titanic's distress calls were not heard over the radio. Another ship, the Samson, a 250-plus ton schooner of Norwegian registry, was apparently even closer, only 5 to 8 miles. However, some theorists believe that the Samson wouldn't have answered any calls, distressful or not, for the simple fact that they were partaking in illegal seal hunting. Both of these ships were closer than the Carpathia, the ship which would eventually rescue all the survivors of the Titanic. Nazi Titanic. Some 30-odd years after the sinking of the Titanic, the publicity wing of the Nazi Party released Nazi Titanic, commissioned by none other than propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. In an odd interpretation of the facts, Nazi Titanic tells the tale of a vessel attempting to cross the Atlantic in record time in order to boast the White Star Line share price. Whereas in real life, the lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reynard Lee, both Englishmen, spotted the iceberg. In Nazi Titanic, the man who could have saved the ship from the disaster was of course the German first officer, whose warning was ignored. Furthermore, in real life, Bruce Ismay, the English chairman and managing director of the White Star Line, was vilified by the international press for stealing a lifeboat all for himself. In Goebbels' retelling, he even managed to exaggerate this, depicting Ismay, of course, as a Jewish businessman who bullies the captain, again a German, into plowing through the iceberg and killing pretty much everyone on board. Ismay's story is perhaps the most butchered in any and all fictional accounts of the sinking. The true Ismay was anything but the selfish man he was painted as. During the British Inquiry Report of 1912, its leader, Lord Mersey, concluded that Ismay had in fact helped other passengers off the ship before he himself departed in the last lifeboat. Perhaps the stigma allotted to Ismay was the fact that he was the highest ranking White Star official of all the 713 survivors. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Until the next video, goodbye.